Hello, this is Geezer, and welcome to a new portion of the show that I like to call Psychology 101. Now, I know what you might be thinking. The first question is, Geezer, why are you wearing sunglasses? My response to that is, why aren't you wearing sunglasses? And the second question you may be asking yourself is, why am I using a microphone? Well, I've just figured out that my microphone is actually broken, so I'm using this. Anyway, this is a portion of the show where I'm going to be doing revision. I know what you think of you as me, revision, I know. However, I'm only doing this because of peer pressure. Chiefly made by Laura Murphy and Frank Okora. Yes, I just said your name, and yes, this is going on YouTube. Suck it. So without further ado, if you're a watcher of my other show on this YouTube channel, which why would you be, I would give this a miss, unless you're interested in psychology, furthering your knowledge, or just a massive nerd, like myself. So without further ado, we'll get into our first topic, stress. Now, stress has two different meanings. How stressful. One of the meanings is, it can be the environmental stimulus that triggers a stress response, such as a giant cockroach dancing towards you, because we all know how that feels, don't we? In other words, it's the thing that causes you to be stressed. But the second definition is it can also be the response to the stimulus that is causing you stress, such as running for the hills, or in my case, grabbing a shotgun and getting ready for action. Stress is the response that occurs when we think the demands being placed on us is greater than our ability to cope. These are our own judgments, so we could over or underestimate the demands or our ability to cope. Now, whether this stress is justified or not does not matter. If we think we can't cope, we get stressed. And when we get stressed, something physically changes inside of us. And yeah, I was going to address this earlier, but every time you see me looking down, it's me looking at the revision guide because, well, I know I'm all godly man to this universe and everyone is graced by my presence. However, I don't know everything. I know this may shock you viewers. I don't know everything, and I'm sorry for that. Now let's get to the sciencey bit. The hypothalamus is the bit of the brain that responds to stress, and I'm sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. The evaluation of whether something is a stressor or not occurs in the higher brain centres, the cerebral cortex. When there's a stressor in the environment, these higher areas send a signal to the hypothalamus. This tiny part of the brain makes up for its size by having many functions, including controlling the physiological activities involved in stress. In response to the higher areas, the hypothalamus triggers two processes in the body. Now, one of these is the activation of the sympathomedullary pathway, or also known as the SAM pathway for people who can't read, such as me. Number one, in the initial shock response, the hypothalamus triggers activity in the sympathetic branch of the autonomic, don't get mixed up, nervous system, which is a branch of the peripheral nervous system. Secondly, the sympathetic branch becomes more active when the body is stressed and using energy. Number three, it stimulates the adrenal medulla with the adrenal glands, which reduces adrenaline and noradrenaline into the bloodstream. And these affect the body in several ways, including an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, increased perspiration, any others I've missed, and a slowdown in your digestion and the bowels and yummy stuff like that. Oh, and breathing rate increases, if I didn't say that, which I probably did. Now, the results of all these changes in the body is now the body is ready to use extra energy in accordance to be able to deal with the situation it has been tasked with. Now we get to stress as a bodily response, followed by the activation of the pituitary adrenal system. If the system is long-term, say several hours or more, then the sympathomedullary response will start to use up the body's resources. So a second system produces a counter-shock response which supplies the body with more fuel. It's like putting your body on red alert, basically. The hypothalamus also triggers the release of CHR, which is corticotropin-releasing hormone. For all you higher things that this was going somewhere. Number two, the CRH stimulates the anterior pituitary gland. This then releases a hormone called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Yeah! ACTH travels through the body and then stimulates the adrenal cortex, which is near the kidneys, as we all knew. The adrenal cortex then releases corticosteroids, which gives it energy by converting fat into protein, and I've got a lot of fat to convert, so yeah. And this energy is needed to replace the that which is used by the body's initial response to the stress, e.g. running away or punching it in the face. Now, changes in the body can be seen as having survival value. For example, during our evolution, many threats to us would have been seen as predators or other physical dangers, but nowadays, problems that we're faced with are more psychological than physiological. However, our body still has this basic fight or flight response, where we either run away from the problem or we tackle it head on and punch it in the face. Therefore, the physical stress response is not really needed that much anymore, and in the long term, it may actually be harmful to our bodies. And some stress can be positive and exhilarating. This is known as eustress, e.g. a parachute jump may lead to some kind of arousal. Yeah, I just needed that little nod there to make it creepier than it already was. Turn the page. Now, just to tell you, viewers, I now have pins and needles in my leg. I didn't really need to tell you that, but whatever, let's get on with it. Stress and physical illness. Hans Sell explained stress as a three-stage response. In the 1930s, Hans Sell was researching the effects of hormones when he noticed that rats would become ill even when they were given harmless injections. Which can't have been that harmless, to be honest, but oh well. He concluded that the stress the daily injections had caused the illness, and suggested that all animals and humans got stress and perceived stresses through a three-stage physiological response. Sale called this the General Adaptation Syndrome, and I like to remember this as GAS. Haha, it's an abbreviation of the letters. Woohoo. The first... oh, God, sorry about that. The first... stage in his three-stage plan was the alarm stage. When we perceive a stressor, our body's first response is to increase arousal levels so that we are ready to make any necessary physical response. This means we're able to run away, such as the fight or flight response, or if we're faced with a big-toothed, hairy monster. Yeah, you can see why this revision guide sells so many pages. That doesn't make sense. Oh well. And secondly, we get to the resistance stage. If the stressor remains for a long time, our bodies can adapt to the situation and we seem to be unable to cope in a normal way. For example, if we start a high-pressure job, we would initially be unable to cope and go into the alarm stage, but after a while we would start to adapt to this job. However, physiologically, arousal levels would still be higher than normal to be able to cope with the situation. The exhaustion stage. After long-term exposure to a stressor, our bodies will eventually become unable to continue to cope with the situation, which is evident, really. Alarm signs may return and we may develop illnesses such as ulcers, high blood pressure, depression, and Sale calls these the diseases of adaptation. Long-term stress can affect the cardiovascular system, which was found out by Krantz et al. In 1991. Yes, that is the right year. In a laboratory experiment, 39 participants did one of these three stress-inducing tasks: a math test, a stroke test, and a public speaking test. Their blood pressure and the extent to which the vessels around their heart contracted, low, medium, or high, were measured. Participants were instructed to not take any prescribed heart medication prior to the study. Let's hope they had no people with heart disease. Results. Participants with the greatest indication of higher blood pressure. A small number of participants who showed mild or no myocardial ischemia only had a few very moderate increase in blood pressure. That was awful. I would read what I just said up, because that was awful. Sorry, I can't be asked to do another recording. It takes too much effort as it is. So in conclusion, stress may have a direct influence of aspects of bodily functioning and making cardiovascular disorders much more likely. To evaluate the study, however, although the effects were clearly linked to stress, it can't be said that the one causes the other. Also, it wasn't shown that whether the effects also occur at other times. They might sometimes happen if the person feels relaxed, and therefore couldn't just be linked to feeling stressed. Not everybody showed the same reaction, which suggests the individual differences between the participants may have also played a role. The ecological validity of the study was reduced because it took place under laboratory conditions that weren't fully representative of realised stress. However, the findings of the study are supported by Williams in 2000, and it was seen that people who got angry easy or reacted more angrily to situations had a higher risk of cardiovascular problems, which is obvious. Now, stress can also affect the immune system. The immune system is made of cells and chemicals that seek and destroy bacteria and viruses to keep us healthy. When someone experiences stress over a long time, their immune system stops functioning properly. Loads of studies have tested whether long-term stress makes us vulnerable to infections and or illnesses. Now, Brady et al. In 1958 Well, basically what he did was monkeys were put in pairs and given electric shocks every 20 seconds for 6-hour sessions. What a lovely way to treat animals. One monkey of each pair could push a lever to postpone each shock. The other could not delay them. The results: the executive monkeys were more likely to develop illnesses and lately die. Oh, animal cruelty for the win, guys! Conclusion: the illness and death was not due to the shocks, but due to the stress that the executives felt in trying to avoid them. In the long term, the stress reduced the immune system's ability to fight the ulcers and illnesses that it eventually gained. To evaluate the experiment has obvious ethical issues. The experiment was very cruel and would definitely not be allowed today. Also, we can't generalise results from monkeys to humans, even though our DNA is quite close. Furthermore, we know that people with little control over their own lives can experience high levels of stress, which this research cannot explain. The same immune system suppression also happens in humans, however. Research on humans has also supported the theory that stress can reduce the effectiveness of the immune system. Take the following study by Keikolt Glazier in 1995. Basically, his study was, in a study with an independent measures design, a punch biopsy was used to create a small wound on the arms of 13 different women who cared for relatives with Alzheimer's disease. A controlled group of 13 people took part. Results: wound healing took an average of 9 days longer for the carers than those who were in the controlled group. Conclusion: long-term stress impairs the effectiveness that our immune system can fix diseases and problems with our body. To evaluate the study, Sweeney in 1995 also found that people caring for relatives with dementia took longer than a control group to heal their wounds. However, for both studies, the two groups may have varied in other ways apart from their stress of being a carer. The effects on the carer could be due to a poor diet, lack of sleep, etc. And not just the stress they experienced. The study also contained a small number of participants. For more reliable results, it should have been repeated with a larger number. Now we get to life changes, and life changes are also a huge source of stress. Throughout our lives, we all experience major life events, such as death of a family member, and other stressful things such as exams and being kicked out of the house and having acne. Very, very, very menial things. Yeah, like all the things it says in this book, apart from the acne thing. I wonder why. When psychologists want to find out what level of stress these events cause, they look at health because it's likely to be linked to stress. Holmes and Ray in 1967 studied whether the stress of life changes was linked to illnesses. Holmes and Ray assumed that both positive and negative life events involve change, and that change leads to the experience of stress. Number 2, to test this assumption, they studied approximately 5,000 hospital patients' records and noted any major life events that had occurred before the person became ill. It was found that patients were likely to have experienced life changes prior to becoming ill, and that more serious life changes seemed to be linked to stress and illnesses. They ranked life events on the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, SRRS. Holmes and Ray made a list of 43 common life events and asked loads of people to give each one a score to say how stressful it was to them. They called the numbers that made up each score the life change units. The higher this number of life change units, the more stressful it was. They then ranked events from most stressful to least stressful and called it the Social Readjustment Rating Scale. Now, some of the examples are death of a spouse, which was ranked at 1 and given a life change unit of 100. A divorce, which was ranked number 2, which got a life change unit of 73. Retirement, which was ranked at 10, which got a life change unit score of 45. Life event of changing school, which was ranked 17, which is 37. And rank 42, which I don't quite understand, was Christmas, which got a life change unit of 12. They found a positive correlation between the likelihood of illness and the score on the SRRS. As one variable increased, so did the other. So the more stress a person has experienced, the more likely they were to become ill or gain diseases. That's the same thing, Gareth. Ray et al. Also studied these life changes in another correlational research. Now, Ray et al. In 1970, in a correlational study, more than 2,500 American Navy personnel were given a form of the SRRS to complete before they set sail on military duty of 6 months. They had to indicate all of the events that they had experienced. Higher life change units were found to be linked to a higher incidence of illness over the next 7 months. Conclusion: the stress involved in the changes that life events bring is linked to an increased risk of illness. Evaluation of the study, however, if I can actually read it, The results are not representative of the population and can only be generalised to American Navy seamen. Also, it's genderly biased as well because only men were used. Also, the results don't explain individual differences in responses to stress. There are also limitations associated with using correlational research. You can't assume a causal relationship between the variables. The correlation must be caused by a third unknown variable. As well as this, there are problems with the SRS to rank stressful events. Now, there are some issues with the SRS. The SRS doesn't separate positive and negative life events. Stress and illness might be linked to negative life changes. For example, a wedding might be stressful but positive overall, unless the bride leaves you. While the death of a spouse might have a very negative effect on the person. Long-term minor sources of stress, such as everyday hassles at work, are not really considered as well. Despite criticism, the SRS was useful for showing the changes in life that may link to stress and illnesses. Although the research is correlational, not experimental. Correlational studies aim to establish if two variables are related to each other. They're useful because they allow us to investigate relationships between stress and lots of other different variables. For example, it's likely that our stress levels are the results of many interrelated factors rather than one single factor. On the other hand, experiments aim to establish if a change in one variable causes change in another. They have an advantage if you want to find out exactly what is causing a stressor. Several of the life changes within the SRIs could be related to each other. For example, a big change in job conditions or getting fired are likely to affect a person's financial situation. Pregnancy or a change in personal habits and living conditions may affect personal health. This means that life changes could be both the cause and effect of stress. Turn the page.